Check. Hello, everyone. How are you? Today, we are here presenting Kosovo's climate change agenda, and we will begin the short introduction of everyone. With us, we have an honor to have Minister Aliu, who's the Minister of Environment, Spatial Planning and Infrastructure, which happens to be also the largest ministry in the government of Kosovo. With us is also Member of Parliament, but also the Chair of the Parliamentary Commission on the Environment, Ms. Vitora Pazzoli. Also, we have from the GIZ in Kosovo, Mr. Stefan Magera. So, in terms of the climate change agenda, just a short introduction for everyone else. Kosovo is heavily dependent on coal, lignite coal. In fact, it has the fifth largest reserves of coal in the world. At the same time, it doesn't have a high participation of renewables in its grid. However, they are now committing to decarbonization by 2050, and they have a very thorough, detailed climate and energy strategy, wherein they foresee around 1,600 megawatts of renewables by 2030, an addition of 350 megawatt-hour battery storage with the help of the United States, that will allow integration of renewables in the grid in order to account for the intermittent nature of renewables, and that will lead to reduction of around 32% of emissions in Kosovo. I myself am engaged with UNDP to coordinate and functionize the Interministerial Climate Change Council, which Minister Aliu leads the way in regards to that. Without further ado, let's begin with a short vision of the climate change agenda, which we have the honor to have Minister Aliu to give us a brief overall vision on where Kosovo is heading in terms of its climate agenda and the green agenda overall. Mr. Aliu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agim. Dear participants, allow me to thank you for being here in this side event, as this was the first side event that the Republic of Kosovo hosts at COP. In fact, this is the first time the Republic of Kosovo managed to participate at COP and any other UNFCCC processes. We are grateful to the German government for facilitating an opportunity for us to be here in the name of the Kosovo government and to present to you all the overall vision toward climate change mitigation and adaptation. It is unfortunate that ever since our independence in 2008, when COP14 was held, we only managed to get a glimpse of the negotiations and discussions on our common climate in the year 2022, when COP27 is being held. Throughout these 14 years, Kosovo experienced early floods, with more than 30 million euros of the only reported damages, unprecedented wildfires that were not easy to control from our internal capacities, and numerous times when our water companies had to start thinking on water reduction due to limited drinking water capacities, loss of biodiversity that impacted top chain precious predator species in our national parks, and many hardship for our agricultural communities that had to migrate due to lack of yields from either droughts or late onset of winter. For a developing country with the youngest population in Europe, but with a limited adapting resources as a policymakers, we find ourselves in a difficult position to set the right policies for climate adaptation. This is particularly the case since we are the only developing country in the world which indirectly has obligations toward the Paris Agreement, but has no direct or indirect access to climate finance. However, in despite of the injustice that is done toward Kosovo, when it comes to the negotiating of our common climate that knows no borders, we are still committed to decarbonization of our energy sector by 2050, with a circular economy framework and with a strong focus to increase our institutional and technical capacities to adapt toward changing climate. Prior to diving into depth regarding our climate change agenda, for those who are not familiar, let me give you a brief overview of the Republic of Kosovo. Positioned in the southeastern Europe, we are a landlocked country in the Balkan Peninsula, and we serve as an important link to the connection between Central and South Europe, Adriatic Sea, and the Black Sea. We declared the independence in 2008, and our capital is Pristina, that hosts a significant portion of the total 1.8 million people. We are a democratic parliamentary republic and remain committed to rule of law and democratic values. And when it comes to climate, what is known to be standard in terms of our climate until it further drastically changes, we tend to have a moderate continental climate with variations of a Mediterranean one by the south. About 2/5 of the land is covered by forests and rich assortments of species who dearly try to preserve. Having the 5th largest reserves of lignite in the world, Kosovo depends on more than 95% of its electricity production from 2 aging and polluting coal power plants, which are restricted to use due to no sufficient security of supply and ever-growing demand for energy. The ongoing strategy crisis started happening during the time that we were actually drafting the energy strategy. We could have easily changed our national policies to finance yet another new coal power plant while acknowledging energy security, but we decided otherwise. In despite of lack of climate finance and discrimination of Kosovo in the UNFCCC mechanisms, we have decided that we will embark on a just energy transition that is modeled, foreseen a decarbonization by 2050. By 2031, we will integrate 1,599 megawatts of renewable energy sources, which will account about 35% of our total energy production and will lower emission by 32%. To facilitate such a high integration of renewable energy resources, with the help of the United States, we received more than $2 million to integrate 240 megawatt hour of the battery storage that accounts for the intermittent nature of renewables. With a new energy strategy, by 2031, Kosovo would have experienced more than $3 billion for a just energy transition that will lower emissions and increase security of supply. We did not choose natural gas as a bridge to decarbonization. We went straight forward to the renewable and battery storage with an open door to more innovative sources of clean energy, and this is our commitment. Republic of Kosovo indirectly commits to the Paris Agreement goals through the Sofia Declaration to align with the EU agenda and through the Treaty of the Green Energy Community. However, we are here today to declare that the newly established Kosovo Climate Change Council remains firm in their decision to put forward an unilateral and voluntarily ambitious national determined contributions with the aim to access on UNFCCC and ratify the Paris Agreement. We are here and we will be here, and we demand an equal treatment, especially on access to climate finance, since we are showing efforts for decarbonization, but those efforts are costly and the costs are ending up while Kosovo continuously faces climate adaptation challenges with no adequate resources to adapt. While acknowledging very low historical responsibility for climate change, we're not playing a passive role in climate action. Our approach is a collaborative approach because we believe in the multilateral mechanisms to access a common climate while not leaving anyone behind. It is a time that UNFCCC and its members show that they believe the same by allowing us to be part of these very spaces and to be working closely with you on the global threat we call climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister, for the vision on the climate change agenda in Kosovo in general, and for the vision to be implemented. The first step is to create a legislative infrastructure in order to accommodate further implementation. And that is why we invited Member of Parliament, also Chair of the Parliamentary Commission in the Environment, who's responsible for all the legislation that is related to the environment, but also climate change, or in other words, for every legislation that comes out of the ministry that Minister Aliu leads, then from the government to the Parliament. Therefore, I would ask Ms. Pazzoli to give us an overview on how Kosovo envisions putting forward a legislative infrastructure in the first place, and what does that entail?
Thank you very much, Agim, and thank you for coming in our corner to listen to what Kosovo is doing. As you can see, the government of Kosovo has a vision, an ambitious vision, I would say, on Kosovo's climate action agenda, and has taken some steps to lead Kosovo forward. Given that the government has taken these concrete steps in order to implement the climate agenda, we as parliamentarians have a duty to do. We have to carry on with our work and to do our part as well in order to make this vision of government a reality in Kosovo. As a member of Parliament of Kosovo, and as a chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Environment, Food, Agriculture, Planning and Development, I understand that this is very important for Kosovo, and that our efforts to confront with the climate crisis and align with the EU Green Agenda, we need a legislative infrastructure in place, and we need that as soon as possible. So we need to develop our climate legislation, which consists laws and policies to hit the mark. And since we have the majority in the parliament, we have to use this. And we are determined to act as soon as we can in order to also be in line with the government's vision and ambitions, and also to push forward the climate agenda for Kosovo. We have identified the need to establish a legal basis that is tied with the climate change terminology, since until so far, our efforts to draft climate change policies were only based on different secondary legislation, so deriving from the law on clean air or the law on the environment. What we're doing now is that we have started to work on our new law on climate change. And from the draft that we are working on it, we will try to make sure that we have a fundamental legislative infrastructure. And what is more important is to set a date when to cut our climate emissions to net zero. And we will do this via this new law on climate change. It certainly will enable us formulation of numerous needed secondary legislative documents that will open the door to coherently build a technical infrastructure that informs climate-related policies, projects, and enforces every stakeholder to adhere to carbon emission limits. The new climate change law will also enable Kosovo's government to write climate change adaptation strategy, followed with adequate adaptation action plans. And this will mark the first time we formally focus on climate adaptation by transitioning and conditioning every key strategic national project with a component that meets the climate adaptation agenda. On the other hand, the government has created the Interministerial Climate Change Council, and this council now is coordinating the modeling of the long-term decarbonization path. The long-term decarbonization plan and the results of the modeling serves as a check that we are simultaneously drafting various strategies that talk to each other. So when it comes to our green gas emission targets. Not only that, but there is untapped potential in Kosovo to transform some of the sectors into climate mitigation sectors by changing practices and framework. And we are working on these ones. For example, one of the examples that I can share it with you is the agricultural, forestry, and other land use sector that can be transformed from a net emitter to a net greenhouse gas mitigation sector. Legislation is not only that it's crucial, but it increases the efficiency by allowing intersectoral policies to align with synergies. Kosovo's government has also taken another decision, number 7/54, in order to establish the Climate Change Council. And this council has also started and is committed in working very closely with the team that they have created to develop Kosovo's national determined contributions. So the NDCs, as we all know, are the core of the Paris Agreement. And although Kosovo lacks membership and ratification of the agreement, it shows to the world and to the international community that Kosovo has a clear aim in preparing our ambitious NDCs and ratify the Paris Agreement in the Assembly. When we do this, we will do this in a unilateral way, because you know that Kosovo is not member of the United Nations. And yes, these are some of the steps that the government of Kosovo and the parliament are coordinating some of the policies that will lead Kosovo towards adaptation and being able to expect what will happen and how will Kosovo be affected by climate change. The good thing is that we are in one line, the parliament and the government, when it comes to climate change agenda, and that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Vittoria. If you could have the slides back, and then I would like to have a conversation with Ms. Mager, Mr. Mager, in regards to GIZ work in Kosovo throughout the years, specifically past, ongoing, and then future projects that GIZ has been having that are related indirectly or directly to the climate change agenda. My first question to you is, could you share with us some of the key projects that you see more prosperity in the future, but that have been ongoing and you see more potential, and how they will impact fulfilling of this agenda?
Yeah, thanks, Agim, and thanks for having me here. I can speak for the German Development Corporation, and there are many other donors also, especially also the EU, active in supporting Kosovo on that agenda. And German Development Corporation is mainly supporting on energy and circular economy with GIZ and KfW. And what we have done in the past and what we also will do in the future is, of course, from technical cooperation side, to support these legislative processes that were mentioned. GIZ was focusing a lot on energy efficiency in the previous years. We supported heavily on transposing the EU Energy Performance Building Directive into Kosovo law. Also, what is very important in this sector is always data. In regard to energy efficiency, we've built up an integrated platform for energy efficiency data, which is used now by various institutions, and this is the focus we had in the past. Now, with regard to your agenda that was laid down, German Development Corporation will shift a bit from energy efficiency and will add also regulation for renewables into the portfolio and to support. A new project coming in next year will especially support on putting in place the regulation needed for private investors to come into the market. So what is needed that private investors have the opportunity to set up, for instance, PV installations, small scale but also large scale, to get them connected to the grid, to sell the electricity to the market. Those regulations are not in place yet. Very important so that you reach your goals, and we will support you on this. And also a quick word on KfW. There are two big projects coming up. Solar for Kosovo, which is a 100 megawatts solar PV park, which will be the largest in Kosovo for sure, and if I'm not wrong, even the largest in the Balkans, if this is coming. And one of the major issues in Kosovo in terms of energy that we should not forget is heating. Yeah? And there's also an innovative project of KfW coming in. It's solar thermal heating, but district heating, because, for instance, Pristina is, and other municipalities have good old district heating systems, and now to connect them with new technology is, I think, a very innovative approach.
Thank you, Stefan. Kosovo's case is very interesting because in terms of advancement and making fast progress, you could easily do so if you have a priority from the government level, but also if you have a lot of partners such as GIZ and other development partners that are working on the implementation on the ground and providing financing too. That is why it was crucial to have the Climate Change Council established in order to coordinate not only work within the ministers, but also work within development partners. And of course, it was needed that the minister presents the overall vision so everyone else follows in the implementation. And they have done so with having the legislative policy framework set in place, reforms needed in that regard. Then the next thing that is in line is following science and actually doing greenhouse gas emission accounting for each each sector, for agriculture, for transportation. So we know what the emissions are. Unfortunately, Kosovo only has tier 1 methodology in terms of the accounting. They're looking forward to have tier 2 accounting and to include more quality assurance of the data. As you mentioned, data lacking has been one of the key needs that Kosovo needs to improve. But also there's this potential to follow science in designing projects. And there has been a regional climate model that has been finished in 2020, wherein they show how, depending on different emission pathways, Kosovo will be impacted by climate change and how Kosovo sectors will be impacted. That is why the next priority in terms of the technical and scientific reforms is making an interpretation of the climate model and then following up with a unilateral NDC and the National Energy and Climate Plan, which is an obligation that Kosovo has as a contracting party to the Energy Treaty. So that leads to more adequate climate mitigation and adaptation projects that are following science and are based on, they have a legislation that supports them. In regards to that, we have the energy strategy, a very ambitious strategy. 35% of the energy mix will be renewables, lowering 32% of emissions. But the Council acknowledged that there are other sectors that you could have a potential to reduce emissions. And there are a lot of projects that are always drafted without necessarily having the climate component, but when you really look in depth, you find out that they have a climate potential criteria. And one of them that we have identified, and we would like to sort of present two of them. One is in the transportation sector. If I could move in the slides, please. The railway project that the minister has had in the top of his agenda. The railway project, in terms of the council's opinion, because every project that every ministry has comes to the council and the secretariat and is filtered in order to see whether it will have an impact on climate change, whether it is mitigation or adaptation. And this one was filtered too. And even though it's in preliminary feasibility analysis, we have acknowledged that the lowering of heavy truck transboundary commerce that will happen by not using normal road transportation, by having this railway connection, will lead to significant not only domestic lowering of greenhouse gases, but also transit and for other countries that are using this line. But this, of course, also has other advantages. And I would like the minister to sort of give us a brief overview of what this project entails.
Well, thank you, Agim. In general, the second source of pollution and of emission in Kosovo actually sits from transport. Beside, in one side, through the spatial planning, yes, we are designing the SUMPs for every municipality, and we are designing the general mobility for the entire country. But the main target is to shift to the green transport, and for this it's quite necessary to shift to the railway one. And Kosovo has a railway network that we have inherited. When we inherited from the Yugoslavia, but it is quite old one, and a part of it still functioning. So our main goals now is to modernize and electrify the existing railway network in order to make it as a part of the main transport mean in our country. Actually, to have the more sustainable transport, the main goal for us now is to do the connectivity for the entire region of Balkans. Now, there are two ports of Bar in Montenegro and especially ports of Durrës in Albania that are about to be developed soon. These two ports are going to have a great impact on the entire region, especially the one in Durrës. And without a proper railway network, without the proper hubs of distribution for these goods, we won't have even, also we'll have to continue with a quite polluting ways of transport. For the moment, the port of Durrës, about 30% of it the entire goods that coming from 30% of the cargo shipment are from Kosovo. All these containers are transported by trucks in a very high emissions, and therefore connectivity with the railway project will bring totally a new shape of the transport and make feasible transport for passengers and for cargo shipment. So the multimodality will bring a hub in Pristina as a dry port of the port of Durrës, and will create a possibility of combination of the road, rail transport, and also with the air one, since we have the airport close, the length of airports quite organized and better improved recently in the region. This is on the phases of the pre-feasibility study that we have done agreements with Albania, and also we are continuing agreements for railway network to eliminate all the barriers on the boundaries, same as with Macedonia, with Montenegro, and already we did with Serbia, and they are on the path to being implemented.
Thank you, Minister. The next project that the Council reviewed was one that had to do with how the waste management sector has a potential to be a sector where we mitigate and lower emissions. And we heard that Kosovo became a member of the Global Methane Pledge. And in regards to the methane emissions, one potential commitment or potential way forward to lower methane emissions was the waste management overall. And this project is in line with the EU, but if you could also go more in details on how you envision the waste management in Kosovo. And then I would have Stefan chip in too, because I know the GIZ has been involved strongly in the waste management and circular economy concepts in Kosovo with different projects locally and central.
Well, since Kosovo is dependent on coal for the moment, as 95% of our energy is from coal, and we are determined to shift, we will have to have an integrated approach. So not just renewables, because if we will just look only at renewables, it's going to be difficult for us to reach the targets. As I said, it's the other project is the railway one. That means the transport by going to green, but also it is the mitigation process of the methane, as Agim mentioned. So we have signed, we declared the methane pledge. Therefore, the waste management is let us say, the second main project on our ministry, and we had just recently adopted the strategy, the laws, and we are going toward the finalizing the projects that will directly shift towards circular economy. For the moment, what we are doing, actually, Kosovo, the entire waste that we have, the urban waste, we are processing it the classic way with the landfilling it. Of course, by respecting the European hierarchy of treatment of the waste, we have immediately reorganized the entire our system toward the circular economy. That will mean that our regional landfills that we have are going to have facilities for classification, for sorting, and that will create a good possibility for sorting from the source that will be as a main part of the circular economy going toward recycling. This will mean that on the system we will divide the central part and the local entrepreneurship, and the local one, that the decentralization part is going to take care about the circular economy and recycling process, while when we have to do with the hazard waste and the non-recycled waste, the non-recycled waste of the treatment, it will be centralized and taken on the central government's hand when we have to do about the hazard waste. To do this, we had immediately to do a kind of zoom out, to have a more integrated approach, to combine transport, to have the physical and geographical positions of every landfill, and to see in what are they are close to. And immediately we have realized that the railway transport that we want to modernize actually will be as a first tool of transporting easier and cheaper the waste, the non-recycled waste, into the lost landfills or lost treatment that will be mechanical, biological treatment, or whatever that is going to come out from the feasibility that we will do. So every region is going to have the sorting facilities, building the sorting from the source, direct chain to the further treatment of recycling, and especially treatment of the hazard and the non-recycled waste from the central point as it is as a red point. So all these lines are the railway lines that, as you can see, that will and those RLN and TC are going to be the points where we will have the sorting of the waste and further sending it to the recycling. But what remains non-recycled need to be specially treated in order to reduce the methane. Two of the landfills that are going to be quite far from the center will have the new technology of extracting the methane and using it for the energy purposes.
Thank you, Minister. And that is, of course, acknowledging that most of the municipal waste in Kosovo, more than 60% is organic waste, therefore quite a lot of potential to reduce methane. But Stefan, tell us more about what you think of this project and what has been GIZ's stance on the overall vision and the way forward.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I start quickly with a look back also here, because Kosovo has made very good progress in terms of waste management. Back in 2017, there was only 7% of the territory served with waste services. Now we are above 90%. Back in 2017, we had 2,000 and something illegal landfills. Now we have only 750. That's the latest data from the Kosovo Environmental Protection Agency. And that shows that there's really something moving, and there's this high political priority to improve the sector. What we, with the support of the European Union and the German government, are doing at the moment is aligning to that decentralized approach that the minister just showed. You see here the regional maps, and what is European best practice is regional waste management, so that municipalities in a region organize themselves together to invest in specific waste infrastructure that is needed to reach that EU goal of 65% of total waste recycled and reused. And there are a lot of investments needed for sorting facilities, separation at source. So what we all know, 2-bin systems, 3-bin systems, that is something that is still not existing but is going to come. And with our assistance, we want to build it economically sustainable. Yeah. Also, one number back in 2017, only I think 70% of the households were paying a fee for waste collection. Now that is also above 90%, and this gives quite a good basis to go on and also develop business models how to, as I said, economically sustainable finance such a system. And of course, from the recycled waste, you can nowadays make good money, and this has to be all worked out, and we are supporting there. Maybe just to add on, because we are talking so much about circular economy, Kosovo also is very ambitious there. At the moment, we are working on also bringing in some basic principles, the polluter pays principle, extended producer responsibility schemes for batteries, for end-of-life vehicles, tires. And actually, we are starting at the moment with introducing a deposit refund system for beverage containers, which is our next journey, already starting on Sunday with the minister to see some nice examples in Estonia. And this is going to come. Also, the ban of plastic bags is a very visible means of doing something which will raise the awareness in the public. That is something the government committed to and where we support. And this is a nice journey we are on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think this intersectoral approach is a right approach, and especially if it is focused on mitigation. But of course, acknowledging environmental justice and the fact that, as every other country, Kosovo is also facing problems with climate threats, as the Minister highlighted before, and that is specifically on floods, unprecedented floods, which happen to be in agricultural zones, and also a high number of wildfires that our institutions cannot necessarily withstand. There is going to be more an emphasis on the climate adaptation, as I heard. But could you let us know in what position is Kosovo in terms of access to finance to climate adaptation, and how do you plan at the national level to give an emphasis to climate adaptation?
Well, actually, we are a new country. We have declared our independence in 2008. We are not a part of UN, and we do not have access on the funds and mechanisms of UN, therefore no access to UNFCCC funds or GF and GEF and other funds. So, but anyway, we are so determined to push further and to take our obligations from the Paris Agreement. We are unilaterally going to ratify the agreement, and we will go on with the NDCs as other countries do. So it's going to be on a volunteer base to show our determination toward the policies that actually are taking the entire world today. Of course, that we are a small country, and our impact has been historically very low, and we couldn't have a strong impact into this, what happened. And we are not going to say just we will continue the same way as other countries has done. We will try doing a leapfrog in order to reach the positions and to be in the step as other countries do. As a young country, for a long time, we had other priorities. It was housing after the war that happened. One of the priorities it was building a system that we were lacking, and we had an institutional gap for a long time. But now we are in a position to raise the issues of the environment and especially climate change policies to the higher priorities, and we brought it to the highest point that now have created this council, interministerial councils, where they are bringing policies. And the adaptation projects are going to be part of us, and we hope to run and to seek further for the possible chances for finances. We are determined to push on our own. We are doing as much as we can bilateral meetings and communication with the specific states, also to the organizations and to the funds that we want to seek, and show that we are determined to do our part of work. Let us, somebody help us. We believe that we are in a good step, since there is a goodwill, there is a quite determined government and the society there to go further toward the new climate change policies and to be a part of the world.
Thank you. Even though I could not put the slide, I remember that specifically there's currently a study happening on water reservoirs and water capacities. It is a fact that Kosovo has very limited water capacities, and that's why there's no good potential for hydro. But when I talked earlier about the climate model, the regional climate model, one of the key highlights of that model in terms of the impact on Kosovo was water constraints, and water constraints specifically for drinking water, but also for irrigation. What are your next steps as the chair of the council in order to coordinate with all ministries of like agriculture and potentially also coordinate with municipalities to make sure that in every municipal plan, but also national plan, they include adaptation, climate adaptation?
At first, we are so limited on our water resource. If we do a comparison, for example, with the Republic of Albania, we have 500 million cube meters of water reserves. Albania has 5 billion. They have a lot of capacities, water capacities, while we don't have. We have limitations on the agricultural irrigation system due to the fact that the system of irrigation that we have inherited from the Yugoslavia hasn't been ever done completely. And now, according to that old master plan of waters that we had, a lot of project hasn't achieved to be done in order to manage properly the water that we have, and in order to manage the water floods in our country. So our main areas, the agricultural areas, usually they are yearly flooded, and we have a lot of damages that we have from. So therefore, now managing the floods is going to be the next phase for the, also that will be used for the agriculture, for the irrigation system, and for the drinking water. 3 of our regions, Gilan, Ferizaj, and Vitia, they are lacking the drinking water due to these limits of the water system. But now there are 2 ongoing projects. That one of them is with EU and EBRD finance, that reservoir that will help for floods and for flood management, and also for these 2 regions that will help, and the other to be supplied with water. And there is another project in Kamenis that's going to be with World Bank that we are going to push further. But also, it is still too far from what is to optimize the situation. So in parallel to this, there are projects that we will work on the decreasing the technical losses of our existing network that we have, to build the irrigation water system, and also their next 5 feasibility studies for this year that are being done to identify the 5 next points for management of the floods. Therefore, there are projects. We are ready to push them, and we will seek for the finance that will help Kosovo directly.
Thank you, Minister. Since we're running out of time, almost, I would just open the floor, first of all, Ms. Pezzoli, for closing remarks, Stefan, and then the Minister, and then we'll open the floor for questions too. Ms. Pezzoli, if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, as you heard from the Minister and also some of the inputs that I said from the side of the Parliament, what we're doing in Kosovo is that we're trying quite hard to make Kosovo as an example in the region, a country that will leapfrog from 90% of its energy coming from coal into a clean energy, from a country that has come out of a war from 1999 to a country that is leading to democracy. So this is what we're doing, and we are also here asking for Kosovo to be accepted as a member to get access to UNFCCC funds and negotiations. The United Nations has a principle, and it states, leave no one behind. And this principle is not being respected when it comes to Kosovo, because Kosovo exists, and we should get access to funds and climate and negotiations in climate change in order for us to make our vision a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan, anything?
Yeah, maybe just final last words from my side. I mean, what we've seen here, a couple of things. First is there is this pressure. So there are these old power plants. If one of those blocks there's something this winter, it's going to be very dark and cold in Kosovo. And I can tell you, these politicians, they have a lot of pressure to act because the citizens will be in trouble if it's dark and cold. There's the adaptation topic. And this is the pressure that is for real at the moment. On the other side, also on support level and on high political level, there is a lot of things. The green agenda for the Western Balkans and the commitment of the European Union to support the whole region on the topic, I think is really visible and touchable at the moment. Also, what I think is a good move is the link of the climate and energy topic to the Berlin process, which shows that there's this topic is also in that sense for the political stability of the region also very important, and this gives tailwinds that now should be translated into things on the ground, and this is then maybe also the message from the outside to this government. This is very much appreciated, that commitments and divisions, but now we need to see the numbers on the ground, installed capacity, for instance. That will be the thing to measure in the next years, but what we've seen today, I'm very optimistic that this is going to happen.
Thank you. Minister?
Well, I prepared this more. Well, our climate agenda is set in motion and we are honored to be in this space with you all, to present and ask for further collaboration with you all, in order to allow Kosovo to set an exemplar in the region as a climate leader. We believe it is possible not only due to the fact that Kosovo has covered a small territory, but rather because our government believes in the fact that climate action can indeed be tied to creation of jobs, increase of resiliency, and overall improvements of our people's livelihood. Being the 5th largest proven reserve of lignite in the world and dependent for electricity generation on 2 outdated lignite power plants, Kosovo GHG emissions contribution remains significant. Therefore, the country needs assistance, both financial and know-how, to shift away from fossil fuels. Keeping Kosovo away from UNFCCC programs and funds does not help the process. Thus, we have been here for a week now in many bilateral meetings to request alliance with the party members of UNFCCC in order to support Kosovo's ambition to gain access to these funds and climate finance. It is the right thing to do, and we are ready to show, and we deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Fitore. Thank you, Stefan. Now, I believe we have around 14 minutes until the end of this side event. So let's open the floor for questions and answers. And yes, and I believe someone has the microphone. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much. And my question is, I'm always very interested in civil society engagement or discussion. And you mentioned that Kosovo has the youngest population in Europe. And so as in many countries, and especially, we see it in Germany, that the younger generations are especially interested in climate policies. My question is, like, how do you see, where is the climate ambition in Kosovo coming from? Is it more the government pushing the population, or the population pushing the government?
Mm-hmm. Would like to take that question?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Actually, I used to be a part of civil society. I used to protest a lot. I used to be more in the streets rather than on the government. Now it's difficult for me to keep a tie, and I'm not really comfortable being like this. So whenever you ask for the civil society action, it is always a good feeling, because always there is a good pressure that pushes the governments toward the proper policy. As we say, as I mentioned when this energy crisis started, we could very easily say, let us do another thermal power plant. We have enough coal. We don't know what we will do in the future with that. It is the 5th country in the world for the reserves of the coal. But on the other hand, there is a civil society doing a pressure, and some of them even are saying that let us close everything that has to do with coal. If we would do that, it's going to be impossible to survive the next winter. But to build another power plant, you will have to think twice when you have a voice that is rising every day. Also, there is another good case that has turned the entire governmental approach when it is a matter of the rivers and these hydropower plants that are using the water from the rivers and putting them on the pipe in order to create some little energy and destroy the entire, let's say, ambience within the national parks. And this was a voice that got its place and made the entire state stop when it was a matter of these. So maybe it is experience from the past. We had a very strong student movement on 90s. We were protesting a lot for our schools in 90s. We were abandoned to our schools. And there's a kind of tradition that continued, that every power that comes has to be in a way feared from its own young generation that will suddenly go up on the street and do their job.
Can I add here
Yes,
just
please.
one element to,
Yeah.
because our experience is also linked with, there are lots of requests that come from citizens, and they ask us to protect their rivers, to protect their forests. And when they come to us in the parliament, but also in the government, they have an address now. So somehow our experience and where we come from and how have we reached to here where we are now, it somehow has opened a door for citizens to ask for the government and from the parliament to protect their living areas, their villages and their cities. So we are an open door now, and we're trying to respond as quick as we can. And we like when they come to and knock in our door for their requests in order to protect the environment where we live and we share.
Sometimes our main opposition are our own MPs, like Vitória, who is more activist rather than MP and opposition, direct opposition to our ministry.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Eneida from Albania. It is so good to be here and to see you as part of UNFCCC. Actually, Kosovo has done lots of progress recently in climate change. Congratulations for the Committee on Climate Change that you have. I had a question about it. Who chairs this committee, and are all the line ministries part of this committee as well? And also, regarding, as I'm a climate expert in the Ministry of Environment, I would like to know a little bit more about the capacities of the ministries. Talking as a civil worker, I think that it is, let's say, quite impossible to reach all these strategies and plans and documents that we draft every day. Of course, these are really crucial to be able to receive funds from the other mechanisms as well. But what about the capacities, those that will have to work to implement these strategies? I'm saying this because I suffered myself in the ministry. I know that in small countries, it's really a struggle to have a budget for climate. And in Albania, we don't even have a voice for climate in our budget of the ministry. Climate is as part of the environment as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it is difficult, but it's not impossible. It is quite possible. What we consider is a key to solve the problem is we will have always to have an integrated approach. And the committee that we are mentioning is led by our ministry. It is me as a minister, I'm chairing the committee. And for me it's quite important to have in a background of the coordination of all strategies, sectorial strategies of the ministries, to have a kind of background of the national spatial planning that will help integrating this. For example, when I was speaking about the waste management, if we will look not only at the waste and look locally for the region or within the region, it's not going that we can go so far in that. We'll have immediately to do a kind of zoom out and see the entire factors, how they can match with each other in a national spatial planning or a national strategy concerning different sectors. For example, without a proper transport, green transport and proper efficient transport, we won't have even the proper management of the waste management actually. And this combination of two strategies brought a solution that is very easy to, because everyone will have its own interest. If we will just lead by, let us say, raising the conscience is not going to be enough. We are trying, for example, to do the sorting at the source without having a proper facilities for sorting. We are asking from people to separate their waste. And we were trying to raise this conscience and talk to them. And that was not enough, because everything was ending in the same truck on the end, and everybody was leaving this behind, and it was considered as it is impossible to do it in Kosovo. But it is possible. The first, we will just choose a proper step that's going to be the first one, and to do the proper sequencing of activities that will help each other into the growing, let us say, integrated entrepreneurship of everyone. We believe that with the existing capacities and special trainings, we might organize that these activities that we can just switch to something. It's not that we need something new. We can do a leapfrog. We don't have to go through the same path as the other countries has done. If we would do that, we are so behind. We have to jump. This is our.
Thank you. And if I may add to that a little bit, it's good that we exchange good practices as neighbors. When I was engaged for the consulate, for the secretariat as their policy advisor, the job really entails coordinating all 7 ministries of the line, and it really requires a lot of civil servants to coordinate among each other. That's why the secretariat is with representatives at the technical level from every ministry. Now, the first thing that we have done is sort of a mapping of what is everyone doing to begin with, and what is every donor and development partner doing in order to align everything within the vision that is agreed upon the Council. So that requires daily coordination with the ministers at the same time, but also daily coordination with every ministry to see if any project or policy that they have in their pipeline is in alignment with the agenda. And to do the coordination is always challenging, but thankfully we also have development partners that are helping us on the ground with technical assistance if we need a certain component of the work that is done. And again, it's hard, but not impossible, and a fairly good practice if you want to put climate change at the top priority at the central level. Any other question? Yeah.
Thanks so much for presenting your very ambitious leapfrogging plans. I think it was very timely that you present them here, and thank you so much. I think you mentioned that it's really an obvious case for a quick energy transition. And I would just like to ask in a very pragmatic way, what are the concrete following steps in the next weeks and months to roll out, for example, the solar infrastructure? I was a bit late, so I apologize if if I didn't catch everything. But I would be, yes, very interested in your pragmatic and fast approach to leapfrog, as you said. Thank you.
Well, our ministry, we do not directly implement the renewable energy implementation projects. We have the spatial planning part and we have environmental part. We do plans, and one of the first things that we have did it is by identifying the potentials. So we immediately build a map of the existing potentials for the solar potential that we have in our country. All the state-owned land with the low bonity, agricultural low bonity lands, we have identified for every zone of our country, and they are submitted to the ministry and to the municipalities in order to define the parks that are going to be implemented now. The first bidding will start this year. So we'll start bidding this year, and some of them are going to be on public ownership with the EU and the German funds, in this case with the KfW funds as it is mentioned, and going to be owned by our corporate for energy corporate who now produce energy only by coal. We will need to diversify their business. We will need to diversify not just the production of energy, but we will need to diversify the entire business that will help them shift from the coal. So what is next? Actually, for us as a ministry, the next phase is doing the next map for the wind potentials. We are drafting it after we did the solar ones, and we will start with the solar bidding this year. For the wind potential, we have already have 2 projects. The third one is going one of them is a German company, and after we will have a proper mapping of the potential. We will immediately start with on the next year with the bidding for the wind potentials. So
those are the key steps in that regard.
I didn't mention another aspect. It is a regional approach. It's quite important for us. There have been investments on the communication on the lines, transmission lines between states. For example, now we have a transmission line of 300 kilowatts with Albania, and they have a lot of water. We have a lot of coal. We don't have water, but they don't have coal. So we can combine. We can combine during the winter. We can combine during the summer. When they look up for rain, we look down at the coal. So by combination of the region on the regional level, it will help us all to reach the targets.
And there have been, especially for the energy crisis, already implementing, especially on energy efficiency. The Ministry of Economy released another call, 6 million euros for subsidies, direct subsidies for energy efficiency. The EU also helped with 75 million, and majority of it will go for energy efficiency and the concept of prosumer. But from what I've seen in the renewable energy law, what they're trying to do is eliminate the barriers, because fortunately in Kosovo, the private sector picks up very, very fast. They are 10 steps ahead sometimes. I could take an example. In Pristina, in the capital, even though there's no current fiscal policies on allowing electric and hybrid cars, no VAT exceptions or similar things, fiscal policies, every taxi company has electric and hybrid cars now. So they have understood that they're picking up, they're adapting. And imagine what could happen if we eliminate the barriers too. And the Energy Regulatory Office is undergoing reforms in that regard to eliminate barriers for the prosumers too. So through net billing and net meter for households, they will eliminate that barrier after having implemented quite a lot of renewables through feed-in tariffs. Feed-in tariffs are no longer present. Now they have competitive bids or auctions, as they call it. And of course, transmission, aligning transmission. That's why the work that the Ministry of Spatial Planning is doing is important, because they're identifying where the zones for wind potential are, so the TSO could actually do investments on the transmission level to accommodate potential projects in the future. Because if there's no investments on the TSO, then they could have the power plant, the wind power plant, but they need to be connected somewhere. So those are the concrete steps right now. I think we ran out of time. It's 2:30. But thank you everyone. Thank you so much, and thank you, Minister. Thank you, Flor Bazzoli. Thank you, Stefan. It was a pleasure.